Anyway, thank you very much, Osa Sensei, and everyone.
I have no video.
No video? Not able to see what I have? Is anyone else having trouble?
I can see. Everybody can see.
It looks good.
Yeah.
Oh, well, hopefully those who can't see will be able to get it worked out. My apologies for that. Anyway, I do want to thank everyone in the Higashi Honganji North American District for inviting me to take part in today's seminar. Got a chance to see some names of old friends. Hello, all of you out there. Hope we get a chance to catch up at the end of today's session. But it's a great honor for me. And Osa Sensei had asked me to speak on this topic, an introduction to the teaching of Shin Buddhism, which I'm very happy to do. It's kind of a big topic, but I'll do my best in the time I have allotted to me. So I'm going to turn on my timer right now. So thank you, everyone. Let me go to the next page. Oops. Okay, here we go. So when we use the word Shin Buddhism, we're using this as an English translation of the Japanese word Jodo Shinshu, which is translated variously. Right now, I'm just using the standard translation in the Nishi Honganji, which is the true essence of the Pure Land Way. Clearly, this is a school of Buddhism, but also a school of thought, which was founded by Shinran. I'd like to begin this examination of the teaching of Shin Buddhism with an important question, which I think stands to reason. Just what is Shin Buddhism? What do we mean by it? And what function and role does it have to play in our lives today? So what is Shin Buddhism? Is it a philosophy? You know, there are those who had said, yes, it is, that it's basically a system of doctrine, lots and lots of books, many commentaries and texts. It has a certain logic to it, perhaps a moral philosophy as well. And so there are those who would say that's what it is. It's a philosophy. It's a set of teachings. Or is it a religion? And there are those who would say, yes, it is religion. That is to say, it's a religion for those who aspire to be born in the Pure Land, who aspire to awaken to the great working of the vow. Or as it said so beautifully in the Three Treasures today, to begin to walk the path of enlightenment. And so is that what Jodo Shinshu is? Is it a religion? There are some who would say it's not. Religion is a word that pertains only to Judeo-Christian theistic religions, but and so we can't use that word for Jodo Shinshu. Or is it a way of life? And there are many people who say, oh, that's what it is. Jodo Shinshu or Shin Buddhism is a way of life. It's not so much a set of teachings. It's not so much a moral philosophy. It's not so much a history lesson in which we learn about those people in the past who have aspired for birth in the Pure Land, but it's a way in which I live my life today. So which one is it? Is it a philosophy, a religion, or a way of life? And often when we ask this kind of question, we sort of, it's based on this assumption it has to be one of the three. It can't be the other two. So which one is it? And my answer to the question is, yes, it is. That is to say, my response would be that Shin Buddhism is all of that. It's a philosophy, it's a religion, and it's a way of life. And I'll go on to try to talk about what I mean by that very shortly. So I have another question I'd like to ask right now. Can Shin Buddhism, its teachings, that is its philosophy, its practices, its religious practices, and its lifestyle be important in our lives today? Can Shin Buddhism play an important function and role in our personal lives and in the lives in the world? And my response is yes, it can. And so one of the ways in which I'll try to frame my response is by saying that Shin Buddhism can enable us to live AAA lives, lives of awareness, authenticity, and appreciation. I want to start with this basic idea that Shin Buddhism is fundamentally a path. It's a journey, just as life is a journey. Shin Buddhism is a path, or we might even say it's a process. It's often said it's a path toward Buddhahood, to Buddhahood, but I very much like the wording of the Three Treasures that we read today. It's a path of enlightenment, and I really feel that that's an appropriate way of describing the path of Shin Buddhism. It's a path of enlightenment, a path of Buddhahood, a path of the working of true reality. But it's fundamentally a path. The starting point of the path is with ourselves, with this description that I am an unenlightened sentient being. We find in all of the different schools of Buddhism different ways of describing the fact that I am an unenlightened sentient being. Sometimes you'll see described as we're dwelling in endless cycles of samsaric existence. Or others will cite the first noble truth, we are afflicted with suffering and dis-ease. Or the second noble truth, it's caused by craving and ego attachment. Or some would also phrase this using fancier words, that we are filled with discriminative consciousness. That is to say, when we view ourselves in the world, we make distinctions. We discriminate within our minds, and we make divisions where there are none. And therefore, we suffer and we make others suffer. Or we are foolish beings, ordinary beings, bombu. Or sometimes the phrases is that we're burdened with evil karma, or we're afflicted with deluded, burning passions. All of these are ways of describing this state, this starting point, that I am an unenlightened sentient being. But even though these phrases seem to be rather pessimistic, in fact, they're not, I believe, that these descriptions are realistic, and they're a gift when we truly understand them. That is to say, when I come to awaken to this reality of myself, it takes place through the working of Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion. But the starting point really lies even further back. It lies within questions that I can't stop asking and that won't go away. Questions such as, who am I? How do I live my life? Why do I see greed, hatred, and foolishness everywhere in the world? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why can't I get what I want in life? And so on. These kind of questions that we have that linger within our hearts and minds, we never can get an answer to, and it just will never go away. These are also the starting point of this Buddhist path. It's often said that the goal, the end point of the path, is supreme nirvana. And that's described in a lot of different ways as well, such as liberation from suffering. Or we might look at the third noble truth, the complete cessation of craving and ego attachment. Or another fancy phrase, the fundamental non-discriminative wisdom. We'll talk about that a little bit today. Or other phrases, perfect enlightenment, Buddhahood, suchness, oneness, thusness, emptiness, formlessness, or sort of the catch-all, inconceivable, inexpressible, and inexplicable. We can't conceive it, we can't give expression to it, we can't explain it because it's real. And so these are all words and phrases used to describe supreme nirvana. A way of perhaps giving another consideration to this is to realize that in actuality, life is full of wisdom and compassion. Life is not just about suffering. It's not just about conflict and delusion, although certainly it's filled with it. But it's also about constantly facing this reality, facing my reality, the reality and questions that I can't get out of my head, and transcending it and being transformed by it. This is also supreme nirvana. My life and everyone's lives can be filled with peace, joy, and fulfillment, and caring. And this world can be a world of peace, freedom, equality, and kindness. So I think that's another way of looking at this sort of so-called endpoint. Now, over the course of many, many years, there's been a real fundamental question, perhaps a religious question, perhaps a philosophical question. It's just, how can an unenlightened being possibly realize enlightenment? When we go back and look at how we've described ourselves, ignorant beings filled with passions and delusions, burdened by karma, what gives us any thought? What gives us the audacity to think that we can do anything that might allow us to become empty of all that, to realize supreme nirvana, to overcome ourselves? What gives us any thought? What allows us to think in any way that we might be able to do this? Well, Buddhists have pondered this question for many, many years. And the model that, for the most part, Buddhists have devised is the model of the path that we talk about. And the path is said to consist of three main elements. That the first is teaching. So Buddhism and Shin Buddhism, there is teaching. There is the Dharma. There are the sutras taught by the Buddha, the many commentaries and interpretations throughout the years, the texts. There's the teachings we hear from our ministers and our leaders, the reading of the three treasures. This is the teaching that we return to, the teaching that we give refuge to, but we seek to learn, we seek to embrace, we seek to come to understand. The second element of the path is practice. That is to say, we put the teaching into practice through physical, through mental, or through verbal activities. We seek to put these teachings into practice. We seek to make them real in a sense. And through this practice, then, we come to a realization. Our eyes, our spiritual eyes open up. Our ears open up and we are able to hear deeply and see deeply. Or maybe putting it another way, we come to realize the truth in the teachings. Or another way, we come to embody within our lives or actualize the truth which the teachings are trying to express. And this is a way of reflecting on this idea of the path that allows an ignorant being to attain supreme nirvana. In early Buddhism, it was thought that there could only be one Buddha at a particular time. And so we're all familiar, of course, with Gautama Buddha or Shakyamuni Buddha as we know him. He's recognized as the one Buddha dwelling in the history of this world. Practitioners didn't aspire to become Buddhas, but rather arhats who would realize the cessation of craving and ego attachment. However, Mahayana Buddhism, a later development of Buddhism, was grounded on the principle that all beings have the potential of attaining Buddhahood. So all beings can attain Buddhahood or have the potential at the very least. As a result of that, it means that in Mahayana, the notion, the belief is that more than one Buddha can exist at the same time. And it's further conceived that in reality, there could be countless, innumerable Buddhas throughout the universe at the same time or at any given time. So there are many Buddhas. Could be the universe, cosmos could be filled with many, 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 many Buddhas. Okay. It's also stated that each Buddha was seen as dwelling within a Buddha land. And a Buddha land was, in a sense, created by the vows of a Bodhisattva to create an environment or circumstances in which that Buddha could teach and guide ignorant beings to realize Buddhahood themselves. So just as there's more than one Buddha, there could be countless Buddhas, there also could be countless Buddha lands. This is an idea fundamental to Mahayana Buddhism. It's all beings have the potential of attaining enlightenment. And of the many innumerable Buddhas, for the most part, it was the Buddha of immeasurable light and life that captured the interest of the many practitioners. Over 290 sutras make some mention of either the Buddha of immeasurable life, Amitayus, and or the Buddha of immeasurable light, Amitabha, and of that Buddha's land of utmost bliss, Skavati. And the sutras often have marvelous description of the marvelous adornments of the Buddha and the land, as you can see from this mandala. So this resulted in then a fundamental story, a narrative of Pure Land Buddhism that really took hold, really captured the fancy of practitioners and devotees, and that became the fundamental narrative or story around which Pure Land Buddhism developed. It said in the largest sutra of immeasurable life, one of those 290 Pure Land sutras, Shakyamuni Buddha tells us of the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, who aspired to attain Buddhahood in order to bring all beings to that very same enlightenment. Under the guidance of a Buddha, Lokeshvara Raja, this Bodhisattva viewed every Buddha land throughout the cosmos and selected the most superlative features of them all. He then proclaimed 48 great vows to bring all beings to birth in this wondrous land and thereby enable them to attain the highest truth. This Bodhisattva then engaged in practices over endless eons of time and attained perfect enlightenment, becoming the Buddha of immeasurable light and life, creating a pure realm of peace and bliss where beings could practice the way to Buddhahood, thus establishing a path for birth for all beings. And of the vows, it's the Buddha's 18th vow, which we know as the primal vow or original vow, declared that all sentient beings who sincerely entrust in Amida Buddha, wish to be born in that Buddha's pure land and say the Nembutsu even 10 times, would attain birth in that land of Skavati. So this is the fundamental narrative. And in that story then is the practice of Nembutsu that was said to have enabled practitioners to attain the assurance that one will be born in the Amida Buddha's land in the life to come. So Nembutsu, as you can see, the kanji for it, Nen and Butsu, or Nyanfo, based on the Sanskrit word Buddhamsmrti, which literally means to think on, to remember or recall, to contemplate or visualize the Buddha, and later came to be also mean to recite the Buddha's name, Namo Amida Butsu. So the traditional Pure Land scheme then, in a religious sense, even kind of moving away from maybe the philosophical features, but in a religious sense for Pure Land Buddhists, this was the scheme that we live in this world, in this life, and that what we do is we wish to be born in a Buddha land, which is in another, which we are able to do after this life comes to an end. So the crucial moment in the religious life of a Pure Land Buddhist was the moment of death, because at the moment of death, it became clear whether or not one would be born in the Buddha land. And the Buddha land is created by the Bodhisattva's vows and practices, presided over by a Buddha who preaches the Dharma, guides beings in the performance of Bodhisattva practices, and that beings who attain birth in this land do so in another life and eventually realize supreme enlightenment. So in a way, a Buddha land is sort of a spiritual way station, maybe a halfway house on the way to supreme nirvana or true Buddhahood. That's the way it was often viewed by Pure Land Buddhists, and became the central sort of focal point of their religious lives. But it also raised a lot of questions, because if the moment of death was so crucial, what do we do? What does one have to do in order to attain birth in the next life? Do we have to practice? Do we say the Nembutsu an awful lot, many times? Or do we have faith? How is it that we are able to be born in that land at the moment of death? And also, the many sutras describe what happens to a person who's born in the Buddha land. That upon birth in the Buddha land, one attains, in this phrase, entry into the ranks of true settlement. That is, one becomes a practitioner who is certain to attain enlightenment, whose eventual realization of supreme nirvana is settled. Or one attains a stage of non-retrogression. That is, once one is born in the Buddha land, there's no going back. Oops, I'm having trouble here. Or when realizes the necessary attainment of nirvana, that one will necessarily attain nirvana in the future. Or one realizes the stage of that is equal to complete enlightenment. So all of these are descriptors then, which describe the state or the nature of one who's born in a Buddha land. That's sort of the traditional Pure Land scheme, and that really formed the structure and the framework of hope and practice for Pure Land practitioners for many years. Shinran, however, Shinran was clearly a Pure Land Buddhist. There's no question about it. But he was also a Mahayana Buddhist, and I would say a Mahayana practitioner, a Mahayana philosopher. And so in many ways, Shinran's notion of Shin Buddhism, or Jodo Shinshu, was grounded both in the Pure Land path as a religious path, but also the Mahayana, the great vehicle teachings. I'm just going to run through a lot of them. We don't have enough time to go through all of them, unfortunately, just to kind of touch upon some of them for you. One of the real well-known principles of Mahayana philosophy is Samsara is Nirvana. That Samsara is Nirvana. Samsara, as you know, represents the realm of endless births and rebirth, the realm of suffering and pain brought on by our karmic bondage. So samsara is represented by this ourselves here. This is the unenlightened beings, and that nirvana represents the cessation of that suffering. And so in one way, nirvana is samsara is a way of expressing the path that the fact that there's this path, this notion of the path from ignorance to enlightenment, from ignorant beings to ones who attain Buddhahood, and that this lies along one irreversible direction, when viewed from the perspective of the practicer. As we consider ourselves, we see this path going forward. It's a gradual path of transformation, of practice, of failure, but also of success. That's the notion of samsara is nirvana. But Mahayana also realized that nirvana is samsara, that at the same time, this path is non-dual. It's not just a unidirectional path from our standpoint, but from the standpoint of enlightenment, it's a path that it goes, in a sense, the other direction. Or ways of saying it is that along this path, attainment is identical with every step. So every step on this path is a step of attainment. Or another way of saying that is every time false discrimination, ignorance is eliminated, true reality manifests itself. Or it might be said in the Zen tradition, every step of practice is identical with ultimate realization. So this is really a fundamental aspect of Mahayana philosophy. Samsara is nirvana, nirvana is samsara. Another notion is form is emptiness and emptiness is form. That this is a sense that form is emptiness, is that through practice along the path, our false thinking, our egocentric thinking is broken through. And what we normally conceive of in the world as a subject and an object is really revealed as being false thinking. And so when this false thinking is broken through, the subject-object structure of thinking is broken through, and we come to a realization of true oneness, true emptiness. But at the same time, emptiness is form, that even as we realize true oneness, even as our false discrimination is broken through, still we live within a realm of discrimination. We live within a realm in which ignorance still exists. And so wisdom then perceives the world of ignorance, but in a way that's now changed, in a way that's grounded in wisdom. Okay, so this is the notion of form as emptiness, emptiness as form. That sort of structure is reframed in this very long sort of a heading that I have here: 3 aspects of non-discriminative wisdom that are realized on the Bodhisattva path. This is kind of, might get overly long, and I won't bore you with all of this. Just to say that this notion is that as one progresses on the path from ignorance to enlightenment, that one comes to realize wisdom through practice, that our false thinking is broken through and we realize wisdom, we realize oneness. But this oneness, realizing the oneness or the eradication of all false thinking is not the end of the path. This path continues on. And it continues on for the Bodhisattva to, in a sense, return to this world, to return to the world of suffering and pain. Because there are ignorant beings, because there are beings who are afflicted with false thinking, the enlightened one, the Bodhisattva, returns to this world and now works within this world to guide all beings to enlightenment. This structure of sort of this forms of non-discriminative wisdom, I think, is captured by a very old song that most of you probably don't remember, but I'm old enough to remember a singer by the name of Donovan. And Donovan, many decades ago, had this song. The lyrics were, "First there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is." And that really, those words really, I think, give a good way of describing this notion of the, non-discriminative wisdom. That first there is a mountain, we dwell within the realm of duality. Then there is a mountain where the Bodhisattva awakens to fundamental non-duality. And then we return to the mountain. Now the mountain is seen from another standpoint. Or another way, I think the really conclusion to all of this sort of Mahayana philosophy is that the recognition that wisdom naturally unfolds as compassion. that ultimately there's no separation between wisdom and compassion. Wisdom unfolds in and of itself as compassion. There are other notions of Mahayana philosophy. I'm going to sort of just gloss over a few of them because I already see we're beginning to run out of time. One is the notion of the three bodies of the Buddha, which is one way of saying that enlightenment has threefold dimensions. When we think of Buddha, we often think of Buddha as the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, sitting under the Bodhi tree. But in Mahayana thought, that's only one form, one body of the Buddha, one dimension of enlightenment. That the fundamental dimension is Dharma Kaya, Dharma body, which is suchness, oneness itself. Okay, it transcends all thinking. It transcends all time and space. The transformed body of Shakyamuni is enlightenment that takes form in this historical world. And the enjoyment body, or Sambhogakaya, is the Buddha that arises through a bodhisattva's vows and practices. And in Pure Land Buddhism, we know this Sambhogakaya, this enjoyment body, as Amida Buddha. There's another way of looking at this, another form of Mahayana philosophy, which is taken on Pure Land forms, which is the notion of a twofold Dharma body. Again, I won't go into too much detail on all of this, other than to say Shinran considered this to be extremely important in his understanding of Amida Buddha. That Amida Buddha is not simply this Buddha out there in some Western paradise, but Amida Buddha is formlessness, then becoming form, or maybe putting it another way, form arising out of formlessness. That this is Amida Buddha, this dynamic activity of enlightenment. Out of fundamental reality, formlessness arises form. And the form that Shinran focuses on is the form of name, Namo Amida Butsu, and light. Amida Buddha is name and light. This is the notion of Amida Buddha and Shinran, again, grounded in Mahayana philosophy. Some more aspects. Tatagata, the meaning of Tatagata. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this word Tatagata. It's a Sanskrit word which really is a synonym for Buddha. Buddha is the awakened one, the enlightened one. Tatagata has a dual meaning. Okay, Tata or Nyo is a reference to supreme nirvana or suchness. Gata, ko, is a past perfect of to go. It has gone. Agata is the past perfect of come to have come. I'm having trouble here. Okay, so on the one sense, Tatagata means one who has gone to suchness, Nyoko. Okay, but it also means one who has come from suchness, Nyorai. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard the word Nyorai in Ondoku-san, Nyorai Daihi no Ondoku wa. Nyorai is Tatagata. So the Buddha itself has this dual meaning of going to suchness and returning from suchness. Okay, so this sense of bidirectionality is really inherent in the notion of Buddha or of the working of enlightenment. Another feature that I'll just sort of gloss over very quickly is Buddha nature, which of course is very important for many schools of Buddhism in the Mahayana tradition. Shinran as well considered Buddha nature to be fundamental. And he saw this as Buddha nature as being synonymous with Nirvana and Tatagata. In this very famous passage, he says this Buddha nature or Tatagata pervades the countless worlds. It fills the hearts and minds of the ocean of all beings, thus plants, trees, and land, all attain Buddhahood. That this Buddha nature, this Buddha, this Tathagata that goes and comes, that is active within not only the realm of nirvana, but within our own realms. It fills the hearts and minds of all beings. Thus, as he says, plants, trees, and land all attain Buddhahood. That one entrusts in the vow of this Buddha, this entrusting, the Shinjin, is Buddha nature. So Buddha nature is very important in Mahayana Buddhism. Shinran also considered it to be vital to his understanding of Amida Buddha, the Pure Land, and of our lives of awakening. Bodhaishin, or the bodhicitta, the mind that aspires for enlightenment, is also really universal in schools of Buddhism. The wish to attain enlightenment is seen as being fundamental to entering onto the path. And Shinran emphasized this Mahayana notion of this, is that when one aspires to attain enlightenment, one is also has the mind or the wish to save all beings. And both aspirations fulfill each other, become fulfilled within one's engagement on the path. Self-power and other power are other key concepts within Mahayana philosophy. And of course, Shinran himself undertakes to really write about it quite often. But one thing I want to mention here is sometimes, I don't know how it is among you in the Higashi Honganji and the Nishi Honganji, the self-power is almost like a dirty word. It's considered to be a bad sort of thing. And it's often seen as is equivalent to self-effort. And so you get this sort of conclusion that some people come to saying, oh, self-effort is bad. We shouldn't try. It's not good. But I think this is a misunderstanding of Shinran. Because Shinran, what he criticized is not so much self-power, but the mind of self-power. Jiriki kokoro. And so for him, the mind of self-power was a way of expressing doubt and calculation of arrogance, or as he says in the bottom one, the conviction that one is good, okay, relying on the self, reflecting knowingly on one's evil heart, judging people as good or bad, the sense of value judgments, of self-righteousness, of doubt and arrogance, of pride and calculation. This is the mind of self-power that Shinran is critical of. Other power is often sometimes seen as being the power of another, being what we get this image of this big Buddha in the sky throwing down thunderbolts of power. But that's not the way Shinran saw it. I think he saw other power as being the power of the vow activity, the working of the vow. It's also to be free of calculation, to be free of other power, free of self-power. And so other power then is very much central to the religious life of a Pure Land Buddhist, in which one entrusts oneself completely to the Buddha's vow and finds oneself engulfed within, embraced within the working of enlightenment. So they're foolish, ordinary beings. Bombu is also a phrase we see often in Mahayana Buddhism, Pure Land. Shinran takes it to a real extreme in way he describes ourselves. He says, we, foolish beings, are us, he says. And we are full of ignorance and blind passion. Our desires are countless, and anger, wrath, jealousy, and envy are overwhelming, arising without pause. To the very last moment of life, they do not cease or disappear or exhaust themselves. So here is, again, this description of the little peanut guy, myself as an ignorant, unenlightened being. This is how Shinran describes us in very stark, very dramatic, very critical terms. But he doesn't end there, because he goes on to say, when we who are so shameful go a step or two, little by little, along the white path of the power of the vow, we are taken in and held by the compassionate heart of the Buddha of unhindered light. This sense of seeing ourselves just as we are through the illumination of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion, and realize that we're taken in and held by the compassionate heart of the Buddha at all times, at all places within our lives. This becomes this awakening that we are able to realize little by little, step by step, as we walk along, as we live our lives. I'm going to come back to this teaching of Shinran again. There's a few other things. I'm going to just jump over it because we're taking too much, but this is another dramatic phrase in Mahayana that Shinran adopts, that the being who is still suffering from blind passions can attain nirvana. There's also the theory of the Dharma ages, which I think probably most of you are familiar with, but this is another key and principal notion in Mahayana that Shinran has adopted, the notion that after the Buddha died, for some 500 years, there was enough momentum, enough disciples who heard the right teaching and engaged in the right practice, that the true teaching, the practice, and realization still existed. But then after 500 years, and for the next 1,000 years, it's sort of the semblance Dharma age. There's just teaching and practice. No one realized enlightenment. So it's all for show. Okay, everyone's just a poser. But then the last age is that the last Dharma age is only the teachings exist for the next 10,000 years. And there's no practice, no true enlightenment. This is a, sort of a historical scheme of the decline of the Dharma that Shinran adopted as well and really made central to his writing, his philosophy, if you would, his doctrine of Jodo Shinshu, of Shin Buddhism. So I just wanted to take you through that sort of journey. Ended up being longer than I anticipated, but based on this Mahayana philosophy, Shinran teaches that teaching, practice, shinjin, and realization of the true essence of the Pure Land Way, that is Jodo Shinshu, is completely given to us, that all aspects of this path are given to us, directed to us through Amida's directing of virtue, the aspect of going forth to the Pure Land. So all of this is sort of complicated language, but based on this Mahayana philosophy that I just sort of covered in a real brief manner, Shinran, of course, he studied it at great length. He was really a good student and really understood the depth of Mahayana philosophy. So based on that, but also as a Pure Land Buddhist, so this integration of philosophy and religion, he came to realize that everything along this path, that the path of enlightenment is directed to us, is given to us. I take this to mean, I kind of reframe this in this way, that even as I aspire for enlightenment and engage the path with utmost sincerity, wholeheartedness, and effort, that's reflected by the tiny, thin little green line. That's my thin little green line. Even as I do, I come to awaken to the reality that my learning, my practice, my faith have not brought about my realization. And even that realization is nothing that I have manufactured. Everything that has been authentic and efficacious in my religious life has been given to me. Okay. So this is something that I think is a way that we could consider how Shinran has sort of turned over traditional Pure Land thought, turned over sort of traditional Buddhist thought in his deep and I think very profound notion of the working of enlightenment. Well, here's another way of saying it. I'm sorry, wrong way. Here's another way of saying it. That I awaken to the dynamic working of enlightenment in my life and the world. Its compassionate wisdom, that is, again, wisdom naturally unfolds as compassion, enables me to see myself as I truly am, a foolish being who is karmically bound to remain in samsara. And yet, this realization is itself the working of Amida Buddha's primal vow, the purpose of which is to bring this me to awaken and immediately attain birth. So one comes to realize in this one moment of shinjin, the awakening of shinjin, that this working of enlightenment is constant, ongoing, in spite of myself, despite myself, one might say. And so this is just sort of another way of talking about Shinran's notion of Amida Buddha, that Amida Buddha is this compassionate means, this formlessness arising as form. It takes a name, Namo Amida Butsu. It makes itself known to us. This is Amida Buddha. And this Tatagata is also light. Light is the form of wisdom. Wisdom is also formless. And so Amida Buddha for Shinran is this working of enlightenment. Okay. Not just a static entity, not this supernatural being sitting up there in some realm in the Pure Land, but ongoing, the working of activity, wisdom unfolding as compassion, of light, which is the form of wisdom, and of the name, which reveals itself to us. That's Amida Buddha. So I came up with this funny little chart. I won't bother you with this, but this is sort of my way of reformulating Shinran's Pure Land Buddhism, of formlessness giving rise to form, okay, coming to us, okay. If you have any questions about this, we could cover this in the Q&A if you're interested. Getting back to that scheme that I showed you before, of the notion in Pure Land Buddhism that we have to do everything in this world, in this life, and at the moment of death, we seek to be born in the Pure Land, Shinran turns this upside down in a way, okay? So for Shinran, what's the crucial moment in a person's religious life is no longer the moment of death, but it's the moment of shinjin. It's awakening to this working of the Buddha's enlightenment, okay? So in Shinran, then, as one awakens, as one's mind opens up and one awakens to this working in this world and in this life, Shinran describes this reality as one immediately realized entry into the ranks of the true settlement, attainment of the stage of non-retrogression, realizing the necessary attainment of nirvana, and attaining the stage of the equal of complete enlightenment. If you remember, way back when, these were descriptors in tradition of Pure Land of one who is born in the Pure Land. For Shinran now, these are the ways in which the person of Shinjin is described here and now in this life. Okay, and then after death, it said, one attains birth in the Pure Land, one attains great complete nirvana. But I think philosophically, what this also means is this realization of nirvana, sorry, I keep hitting the arrows, is non-dual. It's not different from one's realization of Shinjin. But all of this comes through the working of the vow in this direction. Okay, so that's how Shinran has reformulated Pure Land Buddhism based on Mahayana philosophy. He also says that when one awakens true Shinjin, when one realizes and awakens to the working of the Buddha's enlightenment here and now, one becomes a true disciple of Buddha in the truest, most authentic sense of the word. One also realizes, experiences a spiritual death and a spiritual birth. At least that's the way I'm phrasing this, to say that as we awaken to the dynamic working of compassionate wisdom in our lives, we come to discard our old skin of arrogance, calculation, doubt, and pride that our minds have self-power. And little by little, step by step, we find ourselves born. We find ourselves born to our new selves, able to move ahead on our life paths without fear or obstruction. That we realize a spiritual death and a spiritual birth simultaneously within the awakening of Shinjin. So another way of looking at this, and this is the last part of the talk today, that the Shin Buddhist path offers us virtues and values offered in the Shin Buddhist teachings, approach through Shin Buddhist practice, and embodied within Shin Buddhist life, which I want to talk about. And these virtues and values can bring meaning to ourselves and our lives and play an important role in the world today. So now we move into sort of this interface then with not only philosophy and religion, but also Shin Buddhism as a way of life. Now, traditionally in the West, ethics and morality are a subject of great study and great debate. In Western thought, traditionally, ethics and morality are defined within at least three systems of thought, which I won't go into right now, unless you want to cover them in the Q&A. One form of ethics is called deontological or rule-oriented ethics. We follow the rules, the commandments, the law. If we do so, we're good. If we don't, we're bad. Or teleological, goal-oriented ethics. We work in order to attain a goal. If we do so, we're good. If we don't do so, we're bad. That sort of notion. I keep hitting the wrong buttons here. Or virtue ethics, which is very much Aristotelian, this notion of being by our very nature, sort of the embodiment of virtue. Okay, these are Western thoughts, and in Buddhism, there's a different perspective, I think, on virtue and value or merit in Buddhism. This is in Sanskrit, the word is punya, or Pali punya, or in Japanese kudoku. So here, merit or virtue is the force that results from the performance of good deeds, our karma, whether mental, verbal, or physical. Thus, while it has ethical and moral implications, more importantly, it serves to overcome greed, anger, and foolishness, bringing one to the attainment of nirvana. So that's the notion of virtue and merit in Buddhism. And of course, we know that paramita, we study them in Dharma school and the temple. The paramita are perfections. They're also practices that enable a bodhisattva to cross over to the other shore of nirvana. I think you all know them. They're dana, sila, kshanti, virya, dhyana, prajna. Selfless giving, virtue, morality, patience, tolerance, forbearance, energy, diligence, effort, concentration, contemplation, also wisdom or insight. But as we'll also see, and what I believe, this is my interpretation, that I believe Shinran brings this notion of paramita in a different form. They also represent ideals of practice and living, ideals that we seek to engage. And even though we may never reach those ideals, we seek to do so every day. The virtues that we receive and to which we can aspire every day. There's also a notion of merit transference. That is, Buddhism teaches that we can generate merit, we can accumulate merit, and we can transfer that merit to the spiritual fulfillment of oneself and others. The Sanskrit word is parinama, the Japanese word is eko. Shin Buddhism has a slightly different perspective on this, on the notions of merit or virtue and merit transference. I believe that it questions whether merit generation and transference by sentient beings can be really effective, but it also teaches that enlightenment can only be attained through the Buddha's virtue and merit, this sort of other directionality of the working of enlightenment. Based upon all this, I would suggest that perhaps when we talk about merit or virtue in Shin Buddhism, we would be better served to use other expressions that we sort of gravitate to, things like values. I'm having trouble with this. Values, ideals, insights, lessons or guideposts, gifts, legacies, wishes, prayers, and vows. I think these are maybe some words or ideas or concepts, activities and functions that we can sort of get a better handle on when we think about the notion of merit or value or virtue in Shin Buddhism. And so I'd like to take those thoughts now to the last part of my talk today, which I talk in terms of living a AAA life, a life that offers, approaches and embodies awareness, authenticity, and appreciation, reflecting the notion that Shin Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu, is a path in which we live our lives with a growing and deepening sense of awareness, authenticity, and appreciation. And through this approach, I'll try to express some of the core values of the Shin Buddhist tradition. So we start with the notion of awareness. As we hear the Dharma and live with the Nembutsu each and every day, we gradually become more mindful of the reality that surrounds us and pervades us. So awareness, mindfulness is a practice we're familiar with today. I think there's a lot of overlap between the two. Or maybe saying in this way makes a little bit more sense. Little by little, we become aware of our actions, our thoughts, words, and deeds, and their impact on ourselves and others. We become more mindful. We become aware of who we are and what we do, and what the impact of those have upon ourselves and others. As we continue to say the Nembutsu, we gradually hear it voicing the basic wish of life, that life may become itself and give itself freely to others so that we might live. This is my own rendering of the primal vow or the original vow, that life has a wish. There's a basic wish of life, that life may become itself and give itself freely to others so that we might live. I'll return to this idea again. So again, awareness is mindfulness. It means to engage in deep hearing. We open the ears of our hearts. We become receptive and open to and aware of the realities of life. As we walk the path of the Nembutsu, our ears open up little by little, and we begin to hear within our hearts the great sound of enlightenment reverberating throughout the universe. Our ears, our spiritual ears open up, as do our spiritual eyes. We begin to open our spiritual eyes and awaken to the interconnectedness of all lives. Little by little, our eyes begin to open. We become aware of our actions and the impact that they have on others. We begin to understand our connectedness with all other forms of being, and we begin to live our lives accordingly within this realization of our interconnectedness with all beings. Shinjin itself is awakening. Shinran used the term Shinjin to describe the process of our deepening and growing involvement on this Nembutsu path. He talked about Shinjin in a way that goes beyond sort of our conventional ways of thinking of faith or belief or trust. Shinjin is an experience in which we awaken through the Nembutsu to the true nature of ourselves and the inconceivable wish of life. So this awareness, which is both our awakening and living, is none other than the rising of wisdom, which we're able to realize right here and now as we are. As Shinran says, awakening is wisdom. But as we said before, in his understanding, wisdom naturally unfolds as compassion. Compassion, or jihi in Japanese, is really central to all Buddhist schools, not just Mahayana or Pure Land, of course, but all Buddhist schools and all Buddhist paths and walks of life. The first part of jihi is ji, is a translation of maitri or metta, friendliness, intimate feelings of fellowship and close connections. And the second part, Hi, is karuna, pity, sympathy, and feelings of deep compassion for all beings. We come to understand this, that we are not simply the agents of compassion, but we are also the recipients of ongoing compassion. This sort of interplay, this interconnectedness is extremely important to us. In Mahayana Buddhism, well, I'm sorry, not just Mahayana, all schools of Buddhism, there is this great symbol, the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokites Bodhisattva, or we know as Kannon. And here's a photo or a image of the very famous thousand-armed Kannon. For those of you who are seeing it for the first time, if you look carefully, you can see in each of these hands or arms, the Bodhisattva is holding a different object. Here the Bodhisattva is standing in Gasho, but also now in the mudra of wisdom and compassion. It also is holding various objects, which show that through a variety of ways, the Bodhisattva compassion acts to reach out to us who are in ignorance and pain, and is able to guide us to the awakening of Shinjin and wisdom. Okay, maybe as a teacher, maybe as a guide, maybe as a friend, maybe as an enemy. There are a variety of ways in which compassion can work within our hearts and minds, within our lives, to awaken our hearts and minds. So this is the image of the thousand-armed Kannon. I'd now like to introduce you to a poem of one of my very favorite poets. His name was Sakamura Shinmin. I think some of you are familiar with him. He was a very well-known, he was a Jishu Buddhist. He was a Pure Land Buddhist, but in the Jishu tradition. He wrote this poem, which I like very much. It's called Tega Hoshi, okay, I want to have arms. And this is my translation of it, okay. And by the way, this picture I did, it's a brilliant picture. I like it very much. So if you want to focus on the picture, that'd be great. So the poem goes like this. In a picture entitled Mother, drawn by a child who could not see, she is portrayed as having many arms. As I gazed at that portrait, I clearly understood the reality of the thousand-armed Kannon. Since then, each one of her arms seems to have come fully alive. That strange figure is no longer strange at all, for it has taken on the image of truth. Ah, I also want to have 1,000 arms for the children in Vietnam and Pakistan, for the children in India and Nepal. This beautiful poem by Sakamura is one that just resonates for me. It always has. I imagine that Sakamura is writing this. He's looking at a portrait, a very simple portrait, maybe something like this, drawn by a child. I don't know if the child was a boy or girl. I'm really not sure. Let's say he was a girl, but this young girl, little girl, was visually impaired. She could not see. But so when she drew this portrait of her mother, the mother had many, many arms. And initially, Sakamura is thinking, wow, that's a very strange portrait. I wonder why the girl's mother didn't correct her when she's drawing so many arms. And then he began to realize that this is exactly what the thousand-armed Kannon means. That for this young child, the mother was the embodiment of compassion. And that the mother's compassion was delivered to the child in a variety of ways, maybe by bathing the child or helping the child dress or helping the child eat or helping the child with her homework or getting her off to school, maybe scolding her or praising her, maybe helping her in a variety of ways. But for the child who could not see, her mother helped her in all these countless ways. And so it would stand to reason that she would portray her mother as having many, many arms. And Sakamura says, for the first time I understood the reality of the thousand-armed Kannon. And now I realize this is not a strange portrait. Okay, this is truth itself. And then he's inspired. He says, now I've learned about compassion through this portrait. It's a very simple portrait by this child. I know how compassion is operating in my life and in the lives of so many others. I wish I had 1,000 arms. I wish to help all the children of the world in the same way. So this sense of awakening, of wisdom unfolds naturally as compassion, I think is really portrayed very beautifully in this poem by Sakamura Shinmin. Now we move on to the next of the A's, which is authenticity. The path of Shin Buddhism operates within our own personal struggles to be real and genuine and honest. Okay, so we do have struggles. I think I would say, that's one of our great goals, our struggles in life, is to be real, and is to be true and honest and genuine. But it's not easy. It's a struggle. And so authenticity would then mean that on the path of awakening, we receive clear insight and come face to face with the depth of our own ego-centeredness, and at the same time, the boundless compassion of life, which is constantly giving itself to us. Okay. So even as we see ourselves, the first little peanut figures recall, okay, and this reality comes hitting home, with the force of a gale wind, we realize that this awakening is in many ways brought to us because of the compassion of life, the compassion of the Buddha. And we who are so shameful, we find, go a step or two, little by little, along the white path of the power of the vow, and we find ourselves taken in by the compassionate heart of the Buddha of unhindered light. This dual awakening taking place simultaneously, this clear insight into the nature of ourselves and reality, is what it means to be authentic, to become real in the Shin Buddhist path. The Nembutsu path focuses not on faith or belief, rather it's a path of awakening, knowing our true selves, becoming our true selves, living our true lives. Or another way of saying this, the goal of Shin Buddhism is not to be right, but to be true. Okay, we're not Shin Buddhists in order to always be correct, always have the right answers, to be able to wag our fingers of self-righteousness at others. Okay, it's not based on righteousness or justice, but it's based on being true. Shin Buddhism teaches us that life is a path. It's an ongoing series of choices in which we make by relying on the Dharma, but also being responsible to ourselves and others. And I think that path is symbolized here by that very famous parable, the two rivers and the white path you can see here. Shinran Shonin describes the Shinjin as the wisdom of Shinjin. What does that mean? Do we realize Shinjin? Do we suddenly become really smart? Are we wise, sage-like beings? What does it mean to experience wisdom? Are we virtual Buddhas walking around in our old skin? I think Shin Buddhism has a great insight into this problem, which goes like this. When we truly awaken to the depth of our own foolishness, that is when we experience wisdom. Here I want to take a little break from the PowerPoint and just relate one of my favorite anecdotes. I've probably mentioned it to you before if you've ever heard me speak. This is actually a study done by a psychologist, Dr. David Dunning of Cornell University. He did the study on probably college students, but it's been replicated over and over again across many different in many different places and many different contexts. And it goes like this. He first administered an objective test, the kind of objective test I think we're all familiar with: reading comprehension, math skills, spelling, that kind of thing, that we're all familiar with and we sort of survived. And then he asked the students to turn in the test. And then he said, I'm going to give you another test. This is the test. One question: how well did you do on that first test? And they're supposed to answer that, turn that in. And then he compared the results. He compared the results of how students did on the first test with how they evaluated themselves. And now normally you would think those students who did really well on the first test would say, oh yeah, I did pretty well. Or those students who didn't do well, they would say, oh, I didn't do very well. That's sort of common sense. That's what we would expect. But Dr. Dunning said the results he received were just the opposite, which is very interesting. He said those students who did very well on the first test would tend to evaluate themselves pretty harshly. Oh, I didn't do well. Oh, I missed that question. I should have known better. Okay. They just have such a high standard of excellence for themselves that when they fell short at all, they were really critical of themselves. But it was the other group that was more interesting, because those students who didn't do well on the first test, he said, almost without exception, said, oh, I did real well. That was real easy. What a simple test. I aced that test. and which is very strange because it's a self-evaluation that doesn't accord at all with reality. And as a result of that, he came to a conclusion, which he said is based upon something he called competence. Competence. So competence, he said, competent people are so competent that they know when they're incompetent. And they're very clear about it. They have very high standards they set for themselves. So competent people are so competent that they know when they're incompetent. However, incompetent people are so incompetent that they don't know that they're incompetent, so they think they're competent. Okay, that's the conclusion he came to. So incompetent people are so incompetent, they think they're competent. I think all we have to do is switch a few words here from competence to wisdom and incompetence to foolishness, and we see exactly what's going on in Jodo Shinshu. Okay. The wise person is so wise that she realizes when she's not wise. And she calls herself a fool. But the foolish person is so foolish that he doesn't know that he's foolish, so he calls himself wise. That's what the reality that Shinran came to. And he said, so to realize one's own foolishness is to realize wisdom. So this experience of wisdom in Shin Buddhism is very counterintuitive, but it's a wisdom of understanding and seeing oneself exactly as one is. Okay. So wisdom means that we come to know things in others by becoming them as well. It means to awaken to the inseparability, the interconnectedness of all beings and all things. In Shin Buddhism, this interconnectedness is expressed by the phrase, Amida Buddha is immeasurable light and life. That's another aspect of wisdom. This is a sign that I saw some, I guess, 10 years ago now, 2011, when I was in Kyoto long ago. This is during the 750th year commemoration of Shinran's death, his 750th memorial service. This is outside of Higashi Honganji on Karasuma Dori. And I love this photo, this sign, so I took a photo of it. Actually, to be quite honest, the photo I took was not very good. So this is actually from the internet, but it's the same sign. And it says in Japanese, Ima inochi ga anata o ikiteiru. Ima inochi ga anata o ikiteiru, which is a really, really interesting phrase, don't you think? This is the way I would interpret it. Usually we think in these terms, I am living my life. It's my life. No one can live it for me. I'm going to do it. I'm living my life. Don't get in my way. Okay, don't bother me. I'm living my life. But in Shin Buddhism awakens us to the interconnectedness that is life. And it turns our usual thinking on its head to say, now life is living you. Okay. Or as I rephrase it, right now, life is living us. Life is living us, not I am living my life. That's a deep understanding. And I really appreciate that sign that I saw outside of Higashi Honganji some 10 years ago. It's really brilliant, I think. Right now, life is living us. Another way of framing this, and my teacher, Shigaragi Sensei, said this. He said, life constantly sacrifices itself in order to nurture new life. It is just like a plant that withers and decays so as to become the compost that will nourish a new sprout, or like a parent who curtails her own life so that her child may realize full growth. Immeasurable life symbolizes this activity of nurturing true life, activity that is directed to all living beings. So life is living us. Okay. Another value or principle in Buddhism as a whole, and I think is clearly adopted by Shinran, is one of harmony. Harmony, oneness or harmony doesn't require that we all be the same. It rather that we're able to value the differences between ourselves and others. We're able to live as ourselves together with all beings in mutual tolerance, respect, and gratitude. Here's an image of Prince Shotoku from the 6th and 7th century. He was credited with writing the 17th Article Constitution, which sought to ground the nation upon the principles of Buddhism. And this is from the 10th article. It's a very famous one. I'll read it to you because it's so important. It says, you shall be free of anger as well as wrath. You shall not be angry at another's being different from you. Each person has his own mind, and each mind has its own way. What another thinks to be right, I may think to be wrong. What I think to be right, another may think to be wrong. But I am no saint. He is no fool. We are both just common mortals. How can we tell what is really right or wrong? Both he and I are sometimes wise and sometimes foolish, just as an earring is endless. Therefore, you should reflect upon your own faults, even when another becomes furious with you. You should consult with others, even when you think you are right. This is a brilliant text written many, many centuries ago by Prince Shotoku, one that has great relevance today. But when you think about it, in our world right now, which is just divided, our country is just divided in half, right? We're divided, there's racial divisions, divisions in social economic classes, divisions between different political views, divisions in just outlooks on life. We're so divided. We have such, you know, so much conflict going on within our lives, within our country. Can we really live this way? Can we really truly live in accordance with this sense of harmony, to reflect upon our own faults, even when another becomes furious with you, to consult with others, even when you think you're right? I think it's a huge challenge, but it is a challenge. It's a value, it's a virtue to which we can aspire, even though we don't necessarily perfect it, but one that we can constantly be directing our lives to. I think this is a really important, wonderful Buddhist teaching for all of us today. Blend is something that I kind of came up at the Berkeley Buddhist Temple to talk about Buddhist living and equality and non-discrimination. Basically, the idea is that in Buddhism, we learn that unenlightened notions of purity can lead to inequality, discrimination, and violence. So it's vital that we Buddhists and human beings fully appreciate that the reality of life is that one is one of blending. Okay, within every person, family, and society, there's a blending of cultures, races, religions, and lifestyle choices. Nowadays, being a blend is not the exception, it's the rule. The famous D.T. Suzuki, in his translation of Shinran's Kyogyo Shinsho, translated the second chapter, Shinjitsu no Gyo, true practice, as true living. Okay, and I think this is a brilliant translation, because I think in many ways it really speaks to what Shinran Shonin was urging us to do as we live our lives. That our true practice is to live an authentic life. Life consists of choices and actions taken in the midst of and as a result of all of the many external and internal influences that impact us. When our choices and actions are based upon both the Dharma and an awareness of our true selves, they will be authentic. And those choices and actions will define our lives and show us who we are. So true living is our true practice. That is the practice that we engage in every single day. Finally, appreciation. Our awareness of the working of compassion and our ability to live authentically are experienced as coming from outside ourselves, even as we are looking deeply within. Even as we struggle to understand, change, or improve ourselves, we somehow encounter infinite light in life in spite of ourselves. This is the logic of other power. It has a sense of, and yet. It allows us to be aware of other as myself and myself as others. So this is just purely Matsumoto. This is not Shinran, but this is my own kind of take on self-power and other power, or the mind of self-power and the logic of other power. I see them in terms of logic. There's a logic to self-power. It goes like this. I try very hard. That's the first part. The second element. And as a result of my efforts, and the third, the result, the conclusion, I attain great benefit. Okay. This is pretty straightforward, pretty common sense. In fact, I think we employ the logic of self-power every day of our lives. Okay. I try very hard. And as a result of my efforts, I attain great benefit. We can apply this to virtually anything we do. Our efforts to study hard in school, to get good grades, and to get a good job. Our work really hard, to accomplish what we seek to accomplish. And as a result of everything we do, we attain the benefit that we seek. Okay, this is how we get good grades, get good jobs. This is how we build societies, build civilizations, by employing the logic of self-power. The logic of other power, however, is something else. And this is, again, just my own rendition of it. It goes like this. I try very hard, and yet, in spite of my efforts, I attain great benefit. This is an odd kind of logic. it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not something that we would normally employ or utilize in our lives. I try very hard, and yet, in spite of my efforts, I attain great benefit. I think the logic of other power isn't necessarily a logic we apply every day in life, but it is a logic that applies within certain aspects of our life. I think certainly in the area of love, the logic of other power works a lot better than the logic of self-power. I think I can do anything I can to make this person love me, have the best car, the best clothes, the best adjusted gross income, all these kinds of things. I think that's going to result in someone loving me. But it never works that way, or it rarely works that way. Or if it does work that way, we have to wonder what's at work. Instead, the logic of other power, I think, is at work, that we realize that, that when another person really embraces you with love, it's really in spite of everything you've done, in spite of everything I've been. That's kind of reality we come to. It's a realization we come to. And in many ways, in the religious world, it's like that, okay? Because the very difference between the two logic is the center element, right? Self-power is as a result of my efforts. The realization of other power is yet in spite of my efforts. This is, I think, is a rendering of Shinjin, as we said before, coming face to face with the true reality of our foolish selves, who are embraced by boundless wisdom and compassion. Okay, in spite of everything I do, and yet I'm still embraced. Maybe it's easier to understand by looking at this poem. This is a poem by one of the great haiku poets of Japan, okay, Kobayashi Issa. Okay, and it goes like this in Japanese: Tsuyu no yo wa tsuyu no yo nagara sari nagara, which Reverend Dr. Taitetsu Uno translates in this way: a world of dew is a world of dew, and yet. So it's a very simple yet very powerful poem, very profound poem. And I understand it to be like this. A world of dew is a way of talking about the world of impermanence, of pain, of fragility. The life changes all too quickly. The young become the old, the healthy become the sick, those who are living will come to die. This is the nature of impermanence. And of course, we can open up a book in Buddhism. That's the first thing we read. Everything changes, okay? And so we can open a book and say, world of dew, I get it. But our getting it is really just an intellectual getting it. We sort of understand it in our heads. But Issa goes on to say, is a world of dew. A world of dew is a world of dew. This is an understanding he comes to after a life of very difficult experiences. He lost so many of his family members. He lost his worldly possessions. He realized, through loss, through his human life, that yes, everything the Buddha taught us, that life is changed and impermanent, is true. A world of dew is a world of dew. And yet, he says, I can't let go. And yet, I can't give up the wish to possess. And yet, I can't give up the notion that I want to go back to the way things were, to be with my loved ones, to be with my families, to have all those things that I once had. Even though I understand intellectually, even though I've come to realize it experientially, and yet this ongoing ego attachment, okay, this ongoing greed and anger and foolishness remain. But the poem doesn't end there, because it ends with this final sari nagara. And yet, even such a one as myself, who can't let go, who can't stop fiddling around with things, even this person who keeps messing things up, even this person is embraced within wisdom, compassion. Even this person is embraced within the Buddha's heart and mind. Okay. And I think this is the logic of other power, one that we can come to understand through poetry, through the world of love, but also through the world of religion. So internally, deep realization, self-realization, and gratitude are experienced as one, while externally we express our appreciation through stories and verses, images and songs. Okay. And we are moved in response to share this appreciation with all. So here's a haiku, another haiku, one of the favorite ones of my teacher, Shigaragi Sensei. In fact, that's his handwriting there on this shikishi. It goes, Shibugaki no shibu ga sono mama amami kana. which I translate as, ah, how very sweet is the bitterness of the bitter persimmon. As you all know that I had to say persimmon because in order to get it within the syllable count, but you know that we know them as kaki, right? There's two kinds of kaki. I can't remember the names. There's the kaki that you can eat like an apple, fuyu kaki, is that what it's? And then there's the kaki that you can't eat, otherwise your mouth will get all puckered up. I think the hachiya, right? So this is talking about the hachiya. The hachiya are really bitter. I use the word bitter here, or astringent is the more proper word, I guess. If you try to eat a hachiya, your mouth will get all puckered up. So we can't eat them. However, if we do something very special, and one way of doing it is just to peel off the skin and hang them in the air to dry over the course of many days and weeks. We go out once in a while and let them see how they're doing in the air, being exposed to the air and the sunlight, the wind, and we squeeze them now and again. Those brown bitter persimmons become covered with this white sugar. And when they're all dried up, they become something immensely sweet, indescribably sweet. And it said even the most bitter of the bitter persimmons become the most sweet when they're dried. So this poem is about that, about how the bitterness, the hardship in our life, without leaving us, not eliminating it, not trying to just gloss over the difficulty of life, but that very difficulty, the suffering and hardship that we face that become our reality, become transformed, okay? And they transform us to something of utmost sweetness, okay? That's the working of other power. That's the working of the vow within our everyday lives. We also realize profound gratitude. Okay, on one level, we realize a deep sense of gratitude for the many people who have given us life and taken care of us, our parents, grandparents, siblings, doctors, teachers, etc. We give thanks every day for the nourishment of the food and love and support of others and the help of many that we receive daily. Of course, we understand this sense of gratitude, and it's very real. Let's see here. I think I skipped something. Okay, here we go. And Amida Buddha's primal vow, this basic wish of life, that life may become itself, may give itself freely to others, so that we might live. We come to realize this sense, when this wish is fulfilled, an even deeper and even more profound sense of appreciation, that life is given itself to us so that we might live, okay? Sacrifice itself to us so that we might live, okay? We come to appreciate that we were born to receive this basic wish of life. We're born in order to be happy, to realize boundless and limitless joy together with all other beings. And then we act. We respond in gratitude, we pay back, we share what we have received, we take part in a renewed sense of history. We learn from true teachers of the way, share our received awareness, authenticity, and appreciation with all other beings. In a sense, we find ourselves enveloped within the working of the vow. We thereby take the Buddha's vow as our own wish for ourselves in the world. In Shin Buddhism, it might be said that the primal vow or original vow is the real notion of prayer. It's Amida Buddha's prayer. It's not our petition, but this vow is the basic wish of life, which is to become itself and to give itself to us so that we may live. But it's also our prayer, because with that encounter, there arises within each of our hearts a wish to live our true lives together with all beings. And these wishes are our prayers for the world, in Shinran's words. My teacher, Shigaragi Sensei, once again says, I believe that our prayer must contain our aspiration to live our lives, learn the Buddha Dharma, and direct ourselves to the Pure Land. And it will be fulfilled when, above all else, we take Amida Buddha's vow as our own vow and make Amida's wish our own wish. Therefore, prayers for the world require that we learn of Amida Buddha's primal vow, the Buddha's wish for us, as revealed in the 48 vows. Of the 48 vows, the first and second vows express an ideal state of humanness. The Buddha aspires that every being will realize true awakening and become a truly free or emancipated being. So the first two vows of the 48 are aspirations of wishes for true freedom. And what Shinran suggests, I believe, what Shigai Sensei also suggests, is that we take these vows as our own. We aspire to live lives of true freedom, not only for ourselves, but for all beings, true liberation for all beings. The third and fourth vows are aspirations for true equality, or maybe true equity. Okay? The Buddha aspires for the ideal state of humanity in the world, which is truly equal and without discrimination. So to take those vows as our own is also to undertake a wish for all society, for all beings, that we may live together in equality without discrimination. And so the notion then of taking the Buddha's vows of our own as our own could be seen, I think, really concretely in these two instances of taking on the Buddha's aspiration for true freedom and true equality within our own religious lives within the world today. And so in conclusion then, what is Shin Buddhism? Is it a philosophy, a religion, or a way of life? As I said, my way of thinking, it's all of the above. Okay, it's a path of awakening that offers us virtues and values expressed in the Shin Buddhist teachings, approached through true practice, and embodied within everyday life. And these virtues and values can bring meaning to ourselves and our lives and play an important role in the world today. Finally, I just wanted to mention this wonderful event that's going to be taking place very shortly, and I understand it's going to be based in the Los Angeles Higashi Honganji Temple. This organization, I think, coordinated by Duncan Williams and Fumie Shu and Chenzing Hong, and also Bishop Ito. It's called May We Gather. And I just really want all for your patience, your forbearance, your kshanti in tolerance and listening to me blab on for all this time. Again, thank you very much to Bishop Ito and also Sensei for inviting me to be a part of this. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. So thank you.